I'm logged in as the administrator, and we'll start with the planning repository. This is where we can run a complete item refresh and let it run overnight once a week, or we could run net changes at any desired frequency. This will pick up item planning parameter changes. The supply plan can be submitted from here or the supply plan page. Next, the supply planning event log confirms the last time the data was updated. Here we have at 3:02 p.m. Knowing that we have the most up-to-date item information, we click on View Results to head over to the Planning Workbench. Here we view all information about the items, such as corresponding supply and demand orders in the supply plan. We can also act on the results from the planning engine. Looking at the interface, the top panel gives us all the date information, our planning date range, date generated, and date refreshed. We can narrow the list using filters, user-defined item categories, or locations. We can adjust items on the supply chain by further filtering results by action type, like canceling an order or rescheduling in or out. In the exception type list, we can select from the following predefined messages, which inform the planner about all challenges to the supply plan. For example, selecting items with no activity lists all items with no activity in the planning horizon. In the supply type list, we have the same options. For example, we can sort just by purchase orders, and similarly for the demand type. As you see, all these selections are then netted out in our landing page. This top line is the summary, and all of the numbers are hyperlinked. Let's look at supply. If we look at this on-hand quantity, item A, Detroit manufacturing, this quantity of 10 will be tagged to some sort of demand. By clicking on the pegging tree for on-hand quantity, we see that half of this quantity is going to safety stock and the other half is to planned transfer order number 14. That transfer order is pegged to the item's demand plan in the Miami Distribution Center. The demand in our Miami distribution is tied to safety stock for Detroit manufacturing, and NetSuite keeps everything moving between locations. I'll go ahead and close this window. Clicking onto our Demand tab, we see safety stock requests up at the top, and if we scroll down to our first planned transfer order, number 119. Let's open up this pegging tree here. We can see item G is made up of items H and I. These are coming in with a planned purchase order. They will be manufactured at Pittsburgh Manufacturing based on this planned work order. After manufacturing is complete, we have a planned transfer order to Miami Distribution, and item G will then flow through to the planned transfer order and end up at Orlando Retail. This is all part of our 8-location supply plan. Let's close this demand and return to the summary. Take a look at assembly item D. It's made up of items C and E. We have 2 actions we can take. NetSuite is telling us to consider rescheduling this unfirmed work order, rescheduling it out 1 day. It's also suggesting to cancel the unfirmed work order because there are no future requirements. If I agree with these procedures, I click the boxes and select Perform Selected Actions.
On the item record here on this end table, as we scroll down a bit, you can see that I have a replenishment method of MRP. And I'm going to edit this so that we can take a look at this better. So as we scroll down, you'll see the drop down, right? Reorder point is not going away. Time phase is if you still want to continue to use supply and demand planning, you can. MRP and MPS here really don't do a lot of different features or functionality. It's really a grouping mechanism. And you'll see when I have an assembly item, what I'm doing is I'm using master production schedule, and then I'm putting the components underneath. Here, I'm just using this. And then over here, this window will pop up. So as soon as you do that, and then you can see that I am adding that planning category. Down at the bottom, we have mostly the same fields that you would recognize from demand and supply planning, right? So we have our locations, lead times. Now for the work order items, there's several new fields around lead time calculation, which I'm not going to go through too much today or at all. But most of these fields here are the same as before, but you'll see this is going to have some impact. So this is going to give us some alerts anytime something is with outside of my 10-day barrier, for late demand, advanced warnings. And then if you're using demand plan or forecast, right, we have the typical fields here of backward and forward consumption, demand planning fences, rescheduling parameters. That hasn't really changed. So I'm just going to go back and cancel this here because we don't really need to change that. The next thing, once you've linked your item, right, and those sales orders, as every normal sales order, right, has a quantity and it has a supply required date, and it has an expected ship date, and it has a location. And if you've watched the previous web demo that I did, the allocation, right, it's allocating against inventory. This comes into play in the planning workbench, to your workbench. So the workbench is the primary tool that a buyer or a production scheduler would use. So from left to right, what you'll see is under replenishment method, right? Those were our two drop downs. If I just do master production schedule, you'll see there's just one item. This is a manufactured part, and when I explode it, this is actually the component from the bill of material. So think of it, if you have manufactured products and you want to see the interrelationship of those components to its parent, you can see that right here through an indented form. I'm just going to grab the parts here, and this is just all items that I purchase. That means I buy them, I sell them, except for this one here, which is the one I consume through my manufactured items. Remember those item categories, right? I can filter by those, or I can even filter by, you know, a specific item if I wanted to. I can filter by specific location, and of course I can remove the filter, which then brings back all the data. So if I just wanted to see Boston, as I click on that, and you can see the data changes pretty drastically. At the top here, you can filter across the entire dashboard to see actions, to see exceptions. So maybe all of the items that currently don't have activity, right? So think of your slow moving items, or past due demand, past due supply. Or you want to see only planned purchase orders. Or you want to see work orders as well. So as you tab through this, it filters everything. If you want to get rid of that, you just hit the little X's and you're good to go. The same thing with demand, right? If I want to see just safety stock, and there you go. If I want to get rid of that, get rid of that. So at the left here, we have all the items. So that would be high-level filtering. I can do that same filtering, though, on an individual item or on a group of items here. So for example, if I went to look at actions here, right, I click right here, and I can see that the system is saying, consider firming proposed planned purchase order. Right? Obviously, the system is saying, if you don't do that soon, right, you can have an issue. And the way I explain this to most people in presentations is that if you listen to the actions, you really shouldn't have exceptions. Again, listen to this, less of these, right? So the exceptions is then telling you you have insufficient lead time potentially because you didn't act upon what the system told you, which obviously is a challenge. Then from the supply perspective, right, you have suggestions on potentially what to purchase. And if you click the little icon here to see the pegging, and you expand this arrow, you'll see that that quantity was generated on a combination of a forecast, a sales order, another forecast, and a sales order. So the system took the forecast, which was 50, subtracted, because I'm consuming from forecast, subtracted the sales order amounts, right, and brought these quantities in. Plus, remember, I already had 5 in stock. So it's showing me basically what is pegged. And if it was allocated already, it would be showing it here. If I go to the little icon here, I can filter this by daily, weekly. And what this is showing me is forecasting information, sales order, transfer orders, total demand, right? So you can see the demand going across the top here. As we scroll, then we can see our planned work orders, our current purchase orders, our projected available balance, right? So this is what the system is calculating, what our available balance will be based off of what the current system architecture is. Right, and if I was to click on, let's say maybe something like this, right, I would get a slightly different picture. And really what this is doing is showing you as a buyer when inventory will be out. Now the system's obviously trying to counteract that through suggestions. So I could go item to item and decide what to purchase, but I could also go to supply if I wanted to. And then I could say, you know what, I want to just focus on planned purchase orders. And I tab out of here. And then you can see my start date here, right? So maybe I don't want to place a purchase order that really isn't due until the 17th of November now. And again, you can filter that by date ranges here to make sure you don't. But let's say I'm going to grab these two just for the presentation purposes. I'm going to release these. The system also allows me to create manual planned purchase orders. So I'm overriding the system and saying that I think that we need to put a planned PO in there because of something occurring. I'm going to release the 2 selected orders, and those are queuing up. So if you think of our flow chart here, what would have happened? Let's say if we're looking here, let's say we had a forecast, ran MRP planning workbench, I've released it, it's going to be in here right now. So let's go back to our order items screen. All right, just refresh really quickly. And everything here is pretty well the same, except for this new tab, planned work orders. Here's our 2 items. And again, you have the ability to now overwrite what the system suggested. And at this point in time, you can overwrite the supplier as well. And then again, once you select those 2 and submit, it's just like before. it creates a purchase order for you at that point. So same concept if you were going to create a work order suggestion, that would flow into there. All right, so that's